konuyu konuşacağız. Dünya Kupası'nın da başlamış olduğunu düşünerek futbolun kendisini değil de biraz siyasetini konuşacağız aslında. Çok değerli bir akademisyenle Georgetown Üniversitesi Katar Kampüsü'nden Siyaset Bilimi ve Uluslararası İlişkiler Bölümü öğretim üyesi, aynı zamanda Katar Dünya Kupası üzerine akademik bir kitabı da bulunan, birkaç senedir de ülkede konuyla ilgili akademik çalışmalar yürüten Dr. Danyel Reiche bizlerle Doha'dan. Welcome, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Feyza. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Fine. Well, you must be very excited. Finally, it's the time. The time has come. Professor, I want to start with, Qatar is the first country in the Middle East to host the FIFA World Cup. And the country has been under fire, as you also know, ever since it was awarded the hosting rights. Bribery, corruption, labor rights, LGBT issue, alcohol. It's been way beyond football. So I want to ask you first, organizing World Cup was always this political and controversial, or it was unique to Qatar? Because as far as I know, the last one was hosted in Russia. So I wonder, why did this Qatar World Cup create so much controversy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, hosting the World Cup puts a country under the spotlight of global media, of international human rights organizations, etc. But of course, the question is about what we are talking about. I mean, if we look to the selection process in FIFA, I think every selection in the last 30 years has been controversial. This has a lot to do with the system, the governance system of FIFA to select the next World Cup host. It used to be only the executive committee's 24-member to select the next host. And as a political scientist, I would say that a system in which so few people, in this case all of them men, make such major decisions is tempting for corruption. After the controversial awarding of the World Cups 2018 and 2022 to Russia and Qatar, the entire governance system in FIFA has been changed, and starting with the World Cup 2026, all the member associations in FIFA, which are at the moment 211, host the next host. So I think the system has become more democratic. But of course, there are also other issues that you mentioned, which are specific not only to Qatar, but the Gulf, which have been critically discussed.
Mm-hmm. Professor, how do you see the accusations? How fair do you think the accusations were? Because especially Western media coverage, particularly the British media, because I couldn't count how many articles I have read in the British newspapers over the last decade. So there's a very strong anti-Qatar sentiment, almost like a smear campaign. Why is that, you think? And how fair do you find the accusations?
Yeah, but I mean, also to put things into perspective, I think there are a couple of countries in the world where we have this critical discourse. So in the global south, in Africa and Asia, which is around 70% of all people, I'm not aware of one single country where we have such critical debates. But yes, the British press, but also I'm German media are very negative, some Scandinavian media. It's happening, and I think there are two reasons. First of all, it's certainly justified to critically discuss some issues, particularly the situation of the migrant workers in 2010, when Qatar was awarded the World Cup. But I have to say, when I see how aggressive some of the articles are, by also not recognizing changes that have taken place, I would also say there are double standards when comparing the debate around Qatar and the debate around other mega sporting events such as in Russia and China. And there might be also Islamophobia, because this is sometimes out of proportion how the criticism is formulated from a position of moral superiority, like in the West was always like everything progressive, which is not the case. When I just look at my country, Germany, so just since 2017, the wedding age is 18, and but homosexuality was outlawed until 1994. women needed their husband's consent to open a bank account until the 1970s. So there's so many issues which took time, and the expectation here is that everything is changing overnight, which is not a realistic expectation.
Mm-hmm. Professor, you mentioned change, and this is also in the title of your book, World Cup, Politics, Controversy, and Change. So I want to ask you about this change. How has the World Cup changed Qatar, you think? What was the impact on especially its domestic and foreign policy, and also some very much long-needed reforms, social reforms?
Yeah, I think, Feyza, the World Cup caused some changes. But just to be fair, I think Qatar started to change in the 1990s with the establishment of Al Jazeera in 1996. In 2006, Al Jazeera English, with Qatar Airways at the same time being established and connecting Qatar to many countries in the world. But also with launching Education City in the end of the 1990s, where Georgetown University, where I work, is one of the universities being present there. And 70% of our students are female. I want to emphasize this. So many of the changes started in the 1990s and cannot be related to the World Cup. But particularly the situation of the migrant workers, I think that the global debate put spotlight on their situation and led to legal changes in the last 2 years particularly. So I think it's fair to say it took a bit too much time until changes happened. But changes happened. So there is the first minimum wage in the region since 2020. The kafala system was dismantled, so foreigners can now exit the country without prior approval from the employer. They can switch jobs without approval needed from the employer. And since last year, also the summer hours have been extended where outside work is not allowed anymore. So I think these are tangible changes which have improved the life of hundreds of thousands of people. Has Qatar become now a perfect place? No. But I think these changes need to be recognized, and I'm sure that a path is now on to gradually further improve the situation.
Mm-hmm. Back to the impact on domestic and foreign policy, Professor, because surely it was a great tool for soft power, especially. So what do you think about the impact on Qatar's broader foreign policy, as well as its relations with some neighboring countries? What do you think the impact?
Yeah, I mean, Qatar, as you know, was witnessing a blockade by its neighboring countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, but also Egypt, from June 2017 until January 2021. And Turkey, I would like to mention, that played a great role in helping Qatar at that time by sending some thousand of soldiers, but also supplying Qatar with food. And so the relations between Qatar and Turkey, which had been already good, but they really deepened. And Qatar is now also heavily investing into Turkey. And I think that the World Cup certainly helped to survive the blockade, because maybe Saudi would have even invaded Qatar during that time. But since Qatar has so much connected with the rest of the world through sport, through its media network, through Qatar Airways, I think all of this helped to survive the blockade. And the blockade was a failure. I mean, there were 13 demands and none of them was fulfilled. And one of the demands was, for example, to shut down Al Jazeera. I mean, all these demands were quite unrealistic and all of them failed. But maybe the World Cup also helped, because Saudi qualified for the World Cup, and Qatar and Saudi share Qatar's only land border, and there are thousands of Saudi fans expected to come to Qatar, which I think is great. And with the blockade, if the blockade would still go on, then Saudi fans could not have entered Qatar. Right. So I think it's great. And by the way, it's very important to understand that many families here are transnational. Right. So many families were really affected by this blockade. Right. Separated families. Many families are transnational.
Right. Professor, also I want to ask you about the, because this is one of the most, maybe most expensive World Cup in history. It's claimed that Qatar has spent around $200 billion on infrastructure and development on the other hand, officials say the real figure is around $8 billion. So, but there is a great cost anyway. Do you think Qatar's record spending will pay off? Well, I know that the country is hoping for other benefits, not just economic, but after all, will this be worth it?
Yeah, but these 200-something billion numbers, Feyza, make no sense.
Yes.
I mean, Qatar has a strategy. It's the Qatar National Vision 2030, which was published in 28. And its overall objective is that Qatar is becoming an advanced country by 2030. The airport, the ports, the metro, the streets, the parks that have been built, the new city, Lusail, the new downtown district, Meshreb, I mean, none of this can be related to the World Cup, but it's all included in those numbers. I think so less than 5%, I think, of this number is investments that can be related to the World Cup only, and the rest serves the general development of the country.
So do you think all of it will, well, of course, these are long-term development projects and long-term investments, but this cost will really pay off in all sense. What do you think for the long run?
Yes, because I'm not aware, maybe, okay, Barcelona 1992 Olympics were also a good example, but apart from that, in the last like 30, 35 years, I can't think of any mega sporting event that has been so well integrated into the national development plan. I mean, usually what we see is like in Greece, that an event is hosted and the legacy are white elephants, is infrastructure that's not being used anymore afterwards. Here we can see there are only 8 stadiums. It were 10 and 12 in Russia and South Africa. And one stadium, 974, is a temporary stadium consisting of shipping containers that will be completely dismantled and donated after the World Cup. The Lusail Stadium will be transformed into a community hub. The other stadiums will be reduced in size. Our Education City Stadium, for example, reduced from 40 to 20,000 seats, and it's aiming to host like research institutions afterwards, education institution afterwards. So this country has a plan.
So it's not going to be a waste, as some people argue or claim?
No, overall, no. There might be, there's always maybe something afterwards that, but overall, no.
I see. Okay, Professor, also, follow-up question. Qatar was fully focused on this, making this World Cup happen for the last decade, obviously. It was surely a great motivation and great incentive for many issues, from infrastructure investments to social reforms and many other things. So now it will be over soon, and what happens next? Do you think the country will maintain its gains, economic, social, political, etc.? What do you think for the afterwards, after the World Cup?
Look, Feyza, it's always difficult to predict the future. But overall, Qatar is on a path of development since the mid and 1990s. And sport will become an important policy tool. It will remain an important policy tool. Qatar has a contract with Formula One to stage races the next 10 years. It will be hosting the 2030 Asian Games. There are so many like golf, tennis, whatever international tournaments that will be continue to be hosted. So I think sport will remain an important policy tool, and by being that the case, the spotlight will be still on Qatar. Maybe not that much as now around the World Cup, because that's, I mean, nothing else in the World Cup put so much spotlight on the country. But still, and I think the country is committed to modernize on its own terms, not just by copying like Western standards and models, but I think it's modernizing, it's giving greater opportunities to the female population, and certainly there were also first steps to be more inclusive to non-foreigners, and I expect all of this to be continued gradually, so I don't expect major changes after the tournament.
By the way, how do you see Qatar's, let's say, officials' response or overall handling of this process for the last decade? Were there any mistakes, major mistakes, do you think, in handling the criticism in particular?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you would talk to representatives from international human rights organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, I think they would confirm that Qatar is more open to dialogue than other countries in the region. But of course, it was a learning process. It was not like from the beginning like this. But I think now there is really like a direct engagement between the state of Qatar and international human rights organizations. They can easily access the country. They can easily talk to the country. I think it's also an experience of journalists who come here. You know, I'm hosting myself, often in my office, journalists, so they say they feel here much more free than in other countries. But I think it's a learning process. And I think what was certainly also good was the establishment of the government communication office during the blockade to professionalize responding to international media requests. Because, I mean, it's very important to engage in dialogue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Professor, also, I want to one more time mention your book because it's the first full academic analysis of the Qatar World Cup, politics, controversy and change. Could you tell us more about the book and its major findings, because it's not in Turkish, so maybe our audience would like to hear more about the book. So what were the main findings of your book? Could you please summarize for us?
Yeah, Feyza, as you might know, I'm in the Middle East since a long time. Mm-hmm. So after doing all my degrees in Germany, I accepted a position as an assistant, later associate professor for comparative politics at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. I've been also many times in Turkey, by the way, and co-published with Turkish scholars. And so being in the Middle East located, my interest was, after Qatar was awarded the World Cup, and there was so much criticism of it, I wanted to better understand the Qatari perspective. Why do they want to host the World Cup? What are their goals? And I learned a lot about like small states and how they try to become visible in international affairs, how they try to gain influence, but in the specific case of Qatar also to contribute to national security because the country is sandwiched between two large neighbors, Iran and Saudi Arabia. And we're also discussing the role of international non-governmental organizations in the process of criticizing, engaging with Qatar. And we discussed what we talked in the interview about, like to what extent the World Cup led to changes in Qatar.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time and for joining my program. See you next time, and please enjoy the game.
I'm very sorry that Turkey didn't qualify for the World Cup.
Yes, unfortunately, yeah. Why do you think, by the way? I mean,
I'm very like interested in Turkey since I'm a child, because many Germans, I grew up in Germany, are of Turkish origin. And I'm following also Turkish football, and the head coach of the Turkish national team is at the moment Stefan Kunz, the German, and his deputy coach used to be a coach with my favorite team, Hannover 96. Mm-hmm. So I'm really closely following it, and it's upsetting that Turkey didn't qualify for this.
So why not? Why not? You think, Professor? How do you find the overall performance of Turkish national football team?
Well, there was, I think, overall the participation within Turkey needs to increase, and both on the male and female level. I mean, more kids need to play football and need to be better promoted. And I witnessed many years that often Germans of Turkish origin would be nominated to Turkish national teams rather than promoting the Turkish players in Turkey. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, but I hope now, I think that is the best possible coach Turkey could have, Stefan Kunz. I hope for the next Euro and for the next World Cup, I hope that Turkey will qualify, because I mean there are very few countries on the planet.
Okay, I see.
So football mad people like in Turkey.
I hope next time, as you said, Professor. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the games.
My pleasure, Feyza.
Thank you. Evet, Saat Farkı'nda bu hafta Katar Dünya Kupası'nı konuştuk. Georgetown Üniversitesi Katar Kampüsü'nden Siyaset Bilimi ve Uluslararası İlişkiler Bölümü öğretim üyesiyle Dr. Danyel Reiche. Önümüzdeki hafta yine farklı bir konuyla, farklı bir konukla görüşmek dileğiyle. Hoşçakalın.